Which war you served in?
The Vietnam War. I was there.
And what was your branch of service?
I was in the Army. Got drafted in the Army.
Okay. What was your highest rank that you achieved?
Called Spec 4, or it's E4. You start out as an E1, and you make it, and up you go from there.
All right. And in what general locations did you serve throughout the course of your service?
Okay. I started out in basic training in Fort Dix 2 months. I started on January 1st, 68. 2 months there at Fort Dix. 2 months at Fort Sill, which is artillery training, which is what I went into. And then I did a year in Vietnam, which is good. You do a year, that means you didn't get shot. It's a good thing. And then I had 5 months left for my 2 years back at Fort Sill, the artillery fort. I got out December 5th, 1969.
All right, thank you. Now let's go on a little bit. Some of your days prior to the service and some of your basic training experiences. So first question is, were you drafted or did you enlist?
I got drafted, and that was the only way to go for me. I tried to enlist in the Air Force. I had a knee injury. I had a knee injury when I was 20, and they wouldn't take me in the Air Force. But when I went in the Army, I got drafted, it was prime time and everybody was going. And they're taking, just about anybody. Physical and mental defects, they were taking them. And my knee got better eventually. So it didn't really affect my service at all.
All right. Where were you living at the time?
Manchester, Connecticut, I was living.
And do you recall the actual date?
The
date that you enlisted, or that you were drafted?
What happened was I got drafted on, it was supposed to be December 6th, 1967. So I got on the train to New Haven, got down to New Haven, went down to New Haven, and they told me I had two choices. To go back home for 3 weeks, because Army doesn't plan very well. They're not real smart, a lot of them. There's no such thing as military intelligence, believe me. No such thing. So I get there, they tell me there's no basic training unit ready to go early December. So they said, you got two choices. Either go to Fort Dix, that would be, and have what they call 3 weeks of dead time, downtime, which probably would have been KP every day, now that I think about it in retrospect. Or go home. So I went home for 3 weeks. You don't get paid, but it's good time. In other words, it counts towards the 2 years. So you got to be a fool to want to go down there. So I went home for 3 weeks and started on January 1st, basic training. That's when I started. Okay. So.
Well, how did you feel? Did you have any jitters about this? Were you confident? Were you nervous? How are you feeling?
Yes. I thought my longevity was in question. I didn't think, I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was nervous. I didn't particularly like the Army because of the way they want to tell you what to do. That's part of the whole, that's how they try to mold you. So that's what it was. I didn't like it, but I got through. I didn't want to get any trouble. I didn't get any trouble. That was my goal. Do my 2 years and stay out of trouble.
Out of the brig?
Yeah, well, I think the brig is probably the Navy.
The brig.
Stockade.
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 Okay. Well, with that being said, tell me about your boot camp experience. How'd that go for you?
First place, for me, it was more difficult than most because, not physically, because I was in fairly good shape, but I had an allergy to the cold, a very unusual thing. It's called cold urticaria. You itch from cold exposure. So that was hard. And also, this is the regimentation. You got to follow the rules and that stuff. Physically, it wasn't too bad. It wasn't bad.
So it was more so just having to follow the orders.
Yeah.
Didn't want to conform.
Yeah. Well, of course, they get you at a young age, and I was 22, so it's a little harder to get a guy for me to do it. For guys, a lot of guys were 19.
Yeah.
And but it's still at 22. If it happened now, there's no way. I'd be in trouble. When you get older, you get smarter.
Oh yeah. Age comes wisdom.
Yes.
So how did you get through it?
I got through it thinking, well, look at these guys. Most of these guys, I'm in better physical shape than most of them. So I can do this. They can do it. You look at some of these guys who are, a lot of guys were overweight. Even then we had guys who were overweight. They get through. I can do it. I said, no, it can't be that. It's not that bad. And it was relatively easy in that respect. You know?
Do you remember any of your instructors, particularly any ones that you liked, didn't like?
I remember some I don't like. I don't know their names, but I remember my sergeant. Drill sergeant's name was Sergeant Yarborough. Okay, the first thing he said to me, in my military mind, this do be true. He had a military mind, and he called us all Yardbirds, which is I found out later, is a military recruit. It's also named a singing group later on. So he wasn't that bad a guy. If you just paid attention and did what you're told, you wouldn't get in trouble. So he was okay, all things considered. In the position he was in, things they had to do. So
you just kind of got along because you had to.
Yeah. Most guys did that.
Right.
You don't want them to know you personally. There was just like 200 of us in the unit. You don't want to be known personally. So.
Just kind of hide in the shadows a little bit.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Well, after boot camp, where'd you go? What was your first assignment?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma. They're still cold, but it was March and April. So that was artillery training, and to learn how to fire the guns. And that's what I did for 2 months there. That was a little easier, and because it was a little warmer too. Fort Sill is a fairly, it's southern, it's Oklahoma, almost to Texas, southern Oklahoma. So, the winter isn't perfect there, but it's not as cold as up the Northeast, So that made it a little easier for me. And, the training's easy, because it's designed for some of the guys weren't too smart, They took some guys in there that, in the Army, and they're taking anybody then, So I figured I can do that too. So I did.
All right, well, what were your first impressions of when you arrived at the camp?
At Fort Sill, you mean? Oh, you're thinking, there's 2 more months to go. When the service, what I did was I in my mind, I would do things one thing at a time. So I'd say, look, I get through basic, that's 2 months. Then I go 2 months to get through this, and there's something you have to get through, that's all. That's what I was thinking, And it worked out pretty well.
All right, well, then after you powered through that, where'd you go after that?
I had 30 days leave. And, well, right at the end of Fort Sill, they told us where we were going to go, what was our destination. Most of us, all along through basic and AIT, which is the second phase of the training, the artillery training, they're called Advanced Individual Training, that's AIT. They would tell us that we're going to Vietnam. So they told us all we're going to Vietnam. And some didn't, actually. Some went to Germany, some went to Japan. But they told us where we're going to go, that we're going to Vietnam, right at the end of Fort Sill. And then 30 days leave back in Manchester, and then got on the plane. Took a plane out of Bradley, and then we went to Fort Washington, which is in Washington State. Fort Lewis in Washington State. 4 days there, rained every day, KP every day. 4 days KP, and then over to Vietnam. And that was that.
Well, during your leave, did you see any family? Did you see your friends? What do they think so far? Were they nervous with you being there?
Yeah, I saw my girlfriend. I had a girlfriend at the time, and it was great being back with my friends. Had a good time. A lot of the guys, I understand, a lot of the guys that went to Vietnam didn't show up, or they show up like 3 weeks late or 2 weeks late, which is probably what I should have done, because the saying was, what are they going to do and be sending me to Vietnam? That was the idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I had a good time. I just was dreading, going over there because I didn't know what was going to happen over there, whether I was going to be, whether I was going to make it or not. You know.
Definitely understandable. So after you leave, what then?
Well, after I leave, I got on Bradley, went to Bradley, flew to Fort Washington, and Fort Lewis, and we left, and I spent 4 days there, and then flew to Vietnam, and it was hot. It's really hot. You want me to continue in that?
Yeah, about Vietnam. Please carry on. Tell us about Vietnam, the people you met, what you thought of.
So when I first got there, it was a place called Cam Ranh Bay. It's a nice area. It's back in the, it's warm. I got there at 10 at night. I said, oh man, it was hot. Unbelievable. I said, what's it going to be like tomorrow? Couldn't believe how hot it was. Never saw a thermometer the whole time I was over there. Not once. But it must have been over 100. I don't know. I think it's only maybe 10 degrees above the equator, it's pretty close. It was pretty close. So, well, the next day we had to go out and do a police call, which means we pick up trash. That's what police call is. And I was out there. And I was dying. It was murder. And I actually thought for the first 2 weeks that I couldn't make it. Couldn't adjust to the heat. But after a couple of weeks, like everybody else, I more or less adjusted, got used to it. And it's been about, I'd say, it took about 3 or 4 days. I went to, Benoit, which is the 90th replacement, which is where it's part of your journey to your final unit. And then I'd say in about 3 or 4 days, I got to my unit, which was the 8th of the 6th Artillery. And I think it was into Quan Loy, a place called Quan Loy. And that's where I started. And I started counting the days, 366, 365, 364, etc. And when you got below 100, everybody was happy. That was really, everybody got excited.
Well, so then after your countdown timer expired, you said you had one last stop before you were done. Where'd you go after that?
After
Vietnam.
I went back to Fort Sill for 5 months. Now, they offered me a deal in Vietnam. I had to extend in Vietnam 55 days, 55 more days, and I got out of the Army. That was it. But it was just the start of the monsoon season. And the monsoons, you actually get cold over there, It's chilly. So 55 days, and it was a wise decision, I think, because my hearing probably would have been worse than it is now if I didn't fire, 2 more months there. So I'd opted to go to Fort Sill for 5 months for the full 2 years. And that was just a big, didn't do much, just stayed out of trouble. And we go out in the field and fire the guns. I didn't, but I got out of that because of my hearing. I got permission to stay away from firing the guns.
Yeah.
I would drive it out there. I would drive the gun out. I drove the tank out there. They call it a tank, but it's really self-propelled artillery. Drove it out there, and then I would go leave the area, and they'd fire the guns. So, and it was pretty easy. KP a couple times, but it wasn't bad.
So it wasn't very exciting, but it wasn't Vietnam. So
that's right.
So that was the good part.
It was better, yes.
All right. Well, during your time in Vietnam, is there anything that you want to tell us about your combat experiences?
Yes. Okay, I could tell you about that. Most of the time, I wasn't what they call a REM, which was a rear echelon mother Fletcher. Not quite that, but you get the idea, So that means, in other words, artillery didn't have it real bad, but it didn't have it real good either. Artillery was, infantry loved the artillery. Because we helped, we saved them a lot of times. And it was, so it wasn't real bad. I spent 6 months in a base camp called Zion, D-I-A-N, which was pretty good duty. And they would say, we got hit last night, like attacked. but it turned out to be one dud mortar would come into the perimeter or something, you know. I guess it was a very safe place to be. Okay. Other times it was more dangerous, especially when we call it march ordered. We would, which means we would have to take our guns and drive over the terrain, and there was some danger there involved because you were leaving a more secure area, and that was. But we never got attacked while we were going. We always did it in the daytime, of course, when it's safer. Sometimes we were at what they call NDPs, which are night defensive positions, where they would take an area of the jungle, maybe I'd say 2 miles in diameter, and spray with Agent Orange or something. It had to be because they were just perfectly clear. They had to clear it out somehow. So they would do that, and then we'd drive in there. The 105 batteries, they flew those guys in there. The 105 artillery, smaller guns, you know. Those were big guns. Those were the most popular gun there, 105. I was on a 155 self-propelled gun. So we drove into these NDPs and set up, the infantry would help us, and we'd have mortar platoons, artillery platoons, other stuff too. I don't know how many people we would have there. And I went to a few of those, a few of those places. And those were the most dangerous places to be because we were not in a really safe area. The thing about the Vietnam War was that there was really no safe area. There were no fronts. It was all, we were right in the middle of the action all the time, so that's what happened. I'd say in my time over there, sporadically we would get, places I was, we'd get a mortar or two or a rocket or two come in, and it wasn't much danger. I mean, you could be the unlucky guy, that had happened to. But most of the time it was pretty safe,
All right, well, with that sporadic danger, were there ever any casualties in your unit?
Not with that, but I'd say in my time there, we had, like I say, most of it was boredom, and we fired at night a lot of times. We fired what they call H&Is, harassment and interdiction rounds. We'd go up at 2 in the morning and fire 20, couple rounds, and wait 5 minutes, 2 more rounds. That was just boring, and you'd lose sleep deprivation too. But in my time there, I'd say there was 2 weeks, and particularly one bad night, where we were under the gun all the time. So we had just, let's see, get my date here. The date here in this thing, October 28th. Okay, that's the date. It's in the paper. I got a magazine here about it's about my gun. This might, sorry about the phone. This might be my gun right here, a particular gun. So we were just leaving Loc Ninh. I can't remember how to spell it, but a place called Loc Ninh, and we got to a place called Fire Support Base Rita in October. For about 2 weeks, we were, even in the daytime, we were taking fire, which is unusual. Usually they like to hit at night when everybody's starting to fall asleep and drops your guard. So we were taking rounds in during the day for a couple weeks, and they'd be pumping rockets in and little mortars. The infantry guys would yell, give us information, tell them, mortar attack even before we knew it, because they'd hear them leaving the tubes, So meanwhile, we'd be outside in our guns firing back at them, So, and now that I think about it, we got all this powder that we use it was a dangerous situation, because if one of those rounds landed where the powder was, gunpowder that we used to blow, shoot the rounds out, would have been quite a disaster. So that was happening for about a couple weeks, and then sometimes at night we'd take a few rounds. But then one night they told us, clean your M16s out. They only had to tell us once. because M16s had a reputation for not firing because when they got dirty. So you had to be careful to make sure they were clean. So they told us to do get the M16s cleaned, and then we also had what we call direct fire, a direct fire drill, which means normally artillery goes at about 45 degrees. Our gun would go 12 miles, 12, 13 miles. But this time they want us to lower the tubes flat and shoot on the perimeter, which is we kind of figured out that's not a good thing. We knew something was going to happen. They knew more than we did. So what happened was at I'd say probably 2 or 3 in the morning. That's when they like to hit. And as I found out in this article here, they were NVA. I didn't even know at the time. I didn't know whether they were a VC or, but they were at the NVA or the better army from the north, from up the north. The VC were like the local guys, and they'd be, they would, in the daytime they were your buddies. At nighttime they come and shoot you, But these NVA were real soldiers, and they came in. So they came in at about 3, and somebody yelled, enemy in the wire. So they got into the wire, and they saw this big explosion. I could see it, Whoa, it freaked me out. And they were on us. And I got outside I had my own little bunker. We like dig a little hole in the ground and put sandbags over top. I had my own little bunker. I was in my bunker. They're pretty good for a mortar hits. You're all set. Mortar just hits and it goes out like that. For rocket hits, it'll penetrate and then not good. You probably be dead. But I didn't take any hit there. I got outside and we were under attack. And I go out, and all the guys in my section were in the gun, inside our gun. It's a self-propelled artillery. It's hard to explain, but you can go. I got pictures here. You can go inside the gun and fire. Anyway, you go inside the gun. They're all huddled in there, which is the bad place to be, because the one thing that they're looking for, these guys that are attacking us, they want to make sure they want to take out these guns, because that was their biggest enemy, those guns. So I think they finally all got out of there, and then we heard that the big ball of fire I'd seen was gun number 2 had taken a. They were on that end of the perimeter. They'd taken a hit. Now we were in gun number 4, which is in the middle of the configuration of the guns. They're like 5 on the outside. Gun 4 would be in the middle. So they'd taken a hit. I was in gun number 2. I was Trent. Sorry.
It's something that we have to touch on right now.
No, I can do it. I can finish this.
Okay.
And we can keep the continuity going here. It's probably a good idea. So they were hit, and we lost McBurrows, Williams, Norris. Those are they were my, in my gun section. And what happened was I got transferred because for some reason didn't fit in they didn't get along with the guys there. Most of them were black. It might have been a racial thing, I'm not sure. I really don't know what happened. Actually, the guy, Norris, the sergeant there, was a white guy. He was the guy in charge of that section. So I don't know really the reason why. I got transferred to gun 4, and it was very, fortunate for me. So our job that night was to fire what they call self-illumination. So we put our tube straight up in the air and fire a round up there on a time fuse. And it's illumination round. So what happens is illumination comes down on a parachute. So it illuminates our area so we can see what's going on. So that we can, that's why they hit in the dark, because that's when they could do the most damage. So if we illuminated, we could see them out there better. So that was our job in the middle. That's why we were in the middle of this, in the thing. But anyway, Sergeant Graves, he was my sergeant. When I first got there, he said to me, Dave, you can call me by my first name. I said, oh yeah? He says, yeah, Sergeant. So Sergeant Graves said, do you want, apparently Williams had been hit down there. He'd been wounded. He was dying, actually. Williams, so they asked anybody wanted to volunteer to go down there. So I did. I volunteered and to go down, and we brought a stretcher down there. My weapon on the stretcher, and go get him, to bring him more towards the middle of the perimeter, because they had some doctors in the middle. I didn't want to, so I brought him to the middle, and meanwhile I left my weapon down there. I wasn't a real soldier. I got drafted. I didn't think about these keeping my weapon in my. You're supposed to always have your weapon with you. So and as it turned out, it got blown up. But in my absence, which was another lucky thing, because I went to get the guy. So we brought him to the middle of the area, and the doctors looked at him. We brought him back, and his one of his arms, like hands, was like just hanging down. There was nothing, and his whole face was all like contorted and like maybe a concussion grenade or something. I don't know what happened. I can almost think that the concussion grenade came in and he went to throw it out, and it blew up just as that's my opinion, just as he threw the thing out inside of the gun, it blew up. It blew his hand off, and anyway, he died. Subsequently died like when I was there. And, I couldn't believe it. I said, what? I started telling the doctors, what's wrong? He's okay, right? And he was dead. So, then we went through the rest of the night. And when I got down there the second time, I got a gun, and we saw an MVA guy. He had one of those, we would call it a bazooka, but it's really called an RPG, a rocket-propelled grenade. I could see it. He had it on his shoulder, so I knew it was one of the bad guys. So we didn't have those things, And I pointed out to my sergeant, there's a guy there. Of course, I wasn't smart enough to figure out to start shooting at, So I did start shooting, and actually, it was pretty smart because I started firing in the dirt first, watched the rounds kick up. And I'm not sure if I hit him or not. I don't know. That's the only one, that's the only one I ever saw in the whole battle. Only NBA guy I saw. Most soldiers never, ever see the enemy. You know that? It's amazing.
You're right. You're actually able to see him. Did you ever receive any medals or awards?
No, none that were unusual. I mean, the sergeant said he was going to give me an award for when I went down to get the guy, but that never materialized. When I went to get the Williams, the body down there, to pick him up and bring him back. That never materialized. The truth of the matter is, we were out there before that battle, when they were coming, the rounds are coming in, and we're outside shooting back at them. That was pretty darn dangerous. So if I got one, we all should have got him. I figure. So it didn't make me feel bad.
All right.
That was for that.
Oh, what type of injury did you sustain from that shelling?
I got nothing from that. Nothing. I was very fortunate. We had, near as I can figure, we had about 7 or 8 guys of our unit. About 80 died that night. We had, at my former gun section number 2, we had Williams, Norris, McBurrows. They went and got, I saw Norris, they went and got him. He was all messed up. He died 3 days later. McBurrows, they wouldn't tell me how he died, but I think he died in a ball of fire, like burned to death real bad. And Williams, that was the guy I was telling you about. I think he got a concussion grenade, got him. I think that's what got him. We had Carter on gun section number 6. He got hit by an RPG right in the chest. And they had I told you what a police call was, right? Well, they had a police call for him. He was he was a mess, And then we had a guy in, a driver, I don't remember his name. He died too. He was a truck driver in our unit. So we had about, I'd say, 7 or 8 die in our unit, and then others died too in that night too. Other people died from other units from there, because the more infantry guys must have died, because they were on the perimeter when this happened. They were protecting us, the infantry guys. Must be other guys died. Mortar guys died. I got pictures of a guy, some other guys too, that were in it. We had this guy named Colonel Rogers was there, the black guy, Colonel Rogers. He was running around with a 45 in his hand, going around. God knows why he was there. He's a lieutenant colonel. You don't have to be there when you're a lieutenant colonel. You can be. Those guys are out of they're up in the office somewhere. He was there that night, running around with a 45, shooting people. When I saw him, he got shot right in the lip, and like it was just bleeding a little bit. And then finally, he got shot in the ass, and that was it for him for the night. But he lived. He lived through it. We had one guy there named Big John. He was a black fellow, lefty. He was a lefty. I remember seeing him that night. He got hit in the arm. It was either a they used to call it scrap metal, but it was really shrapnel. They called it. The shrapnel hit him in the shoulder, and ripped it apart, and he was lying on the ground writhing. I mean, he was in a lot of pain. You watch movies on TV. A guy gets shot, and he keeps coming. You get shot in the shoulder. That's it. You're done for. That's the way it is. In fact, he came back. He went to the hospital. He came back 2 months later to the unit. Every once in a while, the shoulder would split open again. The wounds would open up again. I mean, it wasn't a real deep. It was a flesh wound, so it wasn't like he ruined his shoulder. He came back, and that's what happened to him. Okay, did I get off the track there a little bit?
A little bit, but it's all good. I enjoyed the story about the colonel. That was amusing. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit, if that's okay.
Sure.
On to your basic, your everyday life while you're out there. Start out right now with your family. How did you stay in touch with them, and were you able to?
I wrote letters to my girlfriend, my Aunt Barbara, my mom and dad. I did lie a little bit to my parents about the situation, what had happened over there. You didn't tell the truth. I wrote to my friends too, and then told them, about what really happened. So that was nice. My girlfriend, she sent me a letter, a Dear John letter. You guys know what that is, right? Yeah, I got one of those. And she was, apparently she was exchanging bodily fluids with a car salesman. Okay, so, named Nick. I didn't hate Nick. I was mad at her, but I can't blame her, I mean, I was away and, so.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Well, she might have found somebody else.
Well, maybe was the food better? Was that better than your girlfriend? Was the food okay?
The food was great. I thought. I was never been fussy about food, ever. The mess hall, the food. When you had KP, if you got the job, dining room orderly, DRO they called it, you got to go all the chocolate milk you wanted to, And I thought the food was great in Fort Sill, Fort Dix, and Vietnam. In fact, they even got ice cream to us there. They flew it in on a helicopter, and you ate it fast. So the food was good. I liked the food. We had sea rations from 1945, from the war, from the year I was born. Sea rations. We opened them up. They were 23 years old. We opened them up. They were great. That's right.
Wow.
It was amazing,
Did you have enough supplies?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We had good. We were well supplied. We had. They got us beer once in a while. Free beer. Not too much because we were on duty. For example, we'd have usually every night we'd have 6 guns. The 2 guns would be firing. H&I, like I told you, harassment, interdiction. 2 guns would fire. The other 4 guns would be off, not unless we had a fire mission, which meant the infantry needed us, and we'd be firing rounds, over and to protect them. And they protected us too in our perimeter. The infantry guys, now that was a different gig. Those guys, I give them credit. They go out every night, overnight, in the dark, in the rain, all night long. And monsoon season was about 3-4 months long, it rained. You get cold. Those guys are out all night. They don't wear underwear, deodorant. They don't care. And they just look raggedy guys, and nobody messed with them. They wouldn't give them, none of the spit and polish. They wouldn't dare. You guys carry guns. They had things they call fragging. You know what fragging is? They would, in other words, if an officer gave you too much trouble, and these guys have been out in the field shooting people, they'd kill them. I mean, it did happen, not all the time, but it did happen. So the infantry guys, I give them credit. That was a hard thing. It's dangerous. The elephant grass was 15 feet tall. You couldn't see 10 feet in front of you, and you're walking through this stuff. It's bad, dangerous.
That must have been pretty stressful. How did you deal with that?
Well, like I said, for me, I only had 2 weeks that was difficult. We're under attack, and that one bad night. Other than that, it wasn't really that big a deal. I mean, as far as there was the boredom factor, and I want to get the heck out of here. As long as I was there, the whole time I was there was not one discussion about no anti-war talk or no pro-war talk ever, because during that era there was a big protest against the war. Vietnam War. You guys were, I'm sure, you're becoming aware of that, all that stuff. But when I was over there, your main focus was to get out intact, to get home. To get back to, they said, get back to the world. You've heard that expression before, I'm sure. You've heard that. So that was our goal. And artillery, not that bad, not that good either, with a lot of hard work, a lot of hours in the hot sun and sleep deprivation. I got out of there, I'll show you a picture here. This is me when I got out of there. You can see that. 175. They call me rib cage, but they should have anyway, So now I weigh 220, and I'm not really that, I'm only a little overweight. So skinny, I'm strong, because I was a kid. I was 23. But see, this is the monsoon season right here. Can you see that? See all the mud? That's a mess.
That must have been wonderful to deal with.
All the wires we have to lay. They have to lay wires, communication wires between the gun batteries. Every time a track vehicle went over, it ruined the wires. Wow. It pulled them up in the track. It was a fiasco. It was one morning I woke up. I was in this bunker, and I look and my boots are floating away. They were.
Well, that must have been entertaining.
And when my boots got wet, it was a problem because I had 13 feet. Hard to find boots for me, Because your feet, you can even get trench foot, and you know what trench foot is? You ever heard of that?
Yeah.
It was big in World War I, but you can get trench foot even when it's 65, 70 degrees or 80 degrees. But I didn't.
Well, speaking of entertaining stories, did you have any entertainers? Did you see any USO shows? And if not, were there any particular humorous or unusual events that went down?
Okay, let's see. We'll do the one part. You can ask me about one time we've had a fire mission, and the guy forgot. He put the powder in. You shove it in there, but he forgot to put the round in. So it goes out of the tube, one big fireball, flashing fireball, which didn't hurt anybody, but it was funny. We didn't have one. They didn't have one artillery incident where somebody died. Sometimes didn't you read in the paper about what happened in training? Just like some 9 guys just died, and a mortar round exploded in the tube. Well, we didn't have any of that. Nothing. No, not one incident like that. I mean, one guy, Williams, the poor guy Williams, dropped around on his foot. The guy, he was doing it barefoot because they called a fire mission in the middle of the night. He's in his underwear and bare feet, just shooting, firing the gun. And running. And that's the guy that I was telling you about that I went and got. It landed on his toe. But, okay, what else? And what was the other part of that question?
So, yeah, the second part of that question was, if you didn't have any other fun stories to talk about, did you ever see any shows, any USO entertainers, anything like that?
They had a couple shows. It's vague to me what they were. We went and saw them. We had to drink a few beers. And they had also what they call girls would come in for morale purposes, and they would talk to the soldiers. They would bring, I don't know if they actually brought donuts, but they call them donut dollies. You know, that's what they call the girls. They would come in and we'd be out there. We had outdoor showers, you know, and they'd be driving in their trucks, and there would be, you know, we'd be out there, and they'd be driving right by us. You know, it was kind of funny, you know. I mean, you got used to it, you know. But that was about all. There wasn't much. I had 2 R&Rs, you know, not too many shows. I wasn't in an area. I was in the best area I was in was Zion. That was a base camp, but there wasn't much there. I wasn't in an area like Saigon where there was more things of that nature, where you could go to, you see shows and things like that, you know.
Well, what were the R&R likes? Excuse me, what were the R&Rs like?
They, first one was, let's see, Bangkok. I went there for a month. I'm sorry, 1 week. It's about $300. And maybe this is why I didn't want my wife to be here, you know. You know, I mean, a lot of the prostitutes, you know. Girls were like $13 a day. You know, you fed them, all that stuff. That's what happened over there. $300 lasted a long time there, you know. And they would have this beer called Singha beer. It only took 2 when you were well on your way, you know. You know, stayed drunk, and that's what it was. And then I went to Sydney, Australia too. That was they were just building the Opera House then. At that time, the famous Opera House in Sydney, and they were all complaining. The Aussies were all complaining, "Oh, when's this thing going to get done? It's going to take forever." And you know, I remember going on a little cruise there in the water, and it wasn't that exciting, but you know, it was out of there for a week anyway. So,
all right. Well, now onto some more stuff, but not particularly pertaining to service, but more so your life after service. Can you let me know where you were when your service ended, and when that happened? How did you feel?
Okay, so that was Fort Sill. I was at Fort Sill the last 5 months, and it's a long 5 months, let me tell you. You know, not doing much. So, but the last week, I'd say, or 10 days, you don't have any duties. You don't have any duties there at all. Your job is to, you know, all these bases you have to touch, all these places, people you have to see, to get your records, do this, do that, to go to all these things and get ready so you got all the crosses and all the dots, the T's and the I's, get that all ready to go. I did that, and that was the longest, probably one of the happiest days of my life, getting out, I'd say. Well, my wife would probably like to hear it was when I got married, but that was a good day too. But that was pretty happy getting out. So finally, I got out December 5th in '69, and my friend Jerry, who was kind of funny. Jerry was a Canadian who got in trouble in Canada. And he enlisted, to get out of the trouble in Canada, he enlisted in the U.S. Army. Everybody else was going the other way, you know, going to Canada to get out. That was kind of humorous. So he enlisted for 3 years. And he every morning, he said, "Oh, shit, why did I do that? 3 years?" You know. But anyway, he drove me out to the highway with my duffel bag. I was at Oklahoma. Drove me out to the highway, and I stuck my thumb out. I always wanted to hitchhike once, you know. So I hitchhiked I got rides all the way to New Haven. Then I got a train, New Haven, and when I got to New Haven, there were guys that were just going in, because the place where I left from New Haven to go to Fort Dix, they were just on the train. They were getting ready to go in as I was just coming out, and I empathized with them, you know. I said, "Oh shit," but so it took me a couple of days to get to New Haven, and then I called my folks up, and they came and got me in New Haven. Okay, that's what else you got?
Well, what did you do in the days and the weeks afterwards?
What did I do? Let's see. Well, I goofed off for a while. Let's see. the timeline's a little hazy with me, but I'd say I finally got a job. I got a little unemployment. They gave me $300 for being in. The state did. And I got a little unemployment. Then let's see, trying to think this out now. I got a job in the Rogers Corporation. It's a paper mill right down the street in '66 in March. So that would be. I'm sorry, I'm confused here. That was before the Army. After I finally got a job at Household Finance Corporation, loans. I didn't like that at all. Didn't like that. That would be about 1970. And then in late 70, maybe in March, later, it'd be September, I got a job at Owens Corning Fiberglass. And I left there for the post office. I got a job in the post office as a letter carrier. It would be February 28th, 1971. And I stayed there till June 4th, 2004, 33 years. And I liked it. It was a great job. I liked it. And anything else?
Yeah. Did you ever have any schooling after you backed?
No, I didn't. I did go. I went before I went in the Army. I went high school and I did some college, but I was never accused of being a good student. And that's one of the reasons I went in. I got drafted because I flunked out at UConn, University of Connecticut. So no, but since then, after the Army, I could have taken advantage of some offers, but I liked the post office. It was a good job.
All right.
Great job.
Well, did you continue any relationships with any of your friends in the military?
I did not. Jerry, one guy from Fort Sill wrote me, Harrison from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, I wrote a couple letters to him back and forth. He was where that Camille hurricane hit. That's where they hit right there where he lived. And guy named Jerry he wrote a couple, Jerry Billner, he was the guy from Canada, a couple letters. But other than that, no, we never really, no contact. No. I suppose I could probably do it now with the internet, find some of these guys, probably could. I don't know, I just never wanted to.
All right. Well, just a couple other quick little questions in closing here. Is that how did your military experience influence your thinking about war or the military in general?
Well, even before I went in, I thought that I didn't think much of the war thing because mostly war is people at the top planning it and the pawns. Me, for example, and when the NBA hit us, I wasn't mad at those guys that were killing us. I wasn't mad at all at them because I knew they were just like me. A poor Slav or a stupid Slav maybe that was in the Army. So I never had much respect for the military. I empathize with the guys because I was one of them. And I think most of it's all for naught. Most of these guys go in. These guys go to Afghanistan and all these wars. They think they're doing this patriotic thing. And it's all for nothing. No, the only guys I could possibly sympathize with, could agree with, is World War II. That was seemed like they had to be done. They really accomplished something. But as far as the rest of it, even like Korea, for example, we didn't accomplish anything in Vietnam. Nothing's ever accomplished. And the guys who plan these things, these wars, their kids never have to go. Not unless they want to. John F. Kennedy went. I'm surprised, he didn't have to. His father was an important person. And I can't really, I can't blame anybody who would ever, a draft dodger. Just don't rub it in my face, Other than that, if you did it, that's more power to you. I tried to get out and I tried to enlist in the Air Force. But I, physically, because of my knee, I couldn't get in. So that's how I feel about, and I don't like officers. All
right. Well, with that being said, did you join any veteran organizations?
I think I joined them all, but I don't really participate that much.
Okay.
VFW and the American Legion, and we have what they call an Army Navy Club in Manchester. I remember that too. But generally speaking, I don't go to those things. You know, I don't participate. I pay the annual dues, which are minimal, but I don't go.
Okay. So more so just to show support.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah.
All right. Well, how did your service and your experiences affect your life?
I don't know. It's hard to say. For a long time, I think it was just a little bad luck. I had to go, and it didn't affect me. And certainly, not having flashbacks, nightmares. I had a couple nightmares, bad dreams, but not, it maybe have affected me. I don't know. I think anybody who goes there they come out in worse shape than they left when they went there. I would think, I have some issues. I'm unable now to watch any kind of movies at all that have any kind of violence. When I first got out, I watched Clockwork Orange. I don't know why it bothered me so much, but now in retrospect, I think it's possible that's the reason. I don't know for certain, that most people think I'm normal, and I came out of it mostly intact, But I will see, two people talking to each other, and assume they're talking maybe slightly. I don't know. And they're sitting there and having an animated conversation, and I assume they're just about to start a fight. That's not normal, And when actually they're not. They're just, like all Italian people are like that. They all do that. They're not even near fighting. So that's a possibility that it has affected me that way. I don't know for certain. But I was lucky, pretty lucky. Done pretty well. I guess that's all I can, think of.
Good. Well, I'm glad to hear you're okay.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you want to add to the interview before we're over?
Well, I'm sure there's something, and I will think of it when you leave.
All right.
Sorry.
All right. Well, at this time, I just want to say thank you very much for your service, and thank you for letting us interview you.
Oh, yeah. Great.